Gonna wait for a couple seconds to let people get on. Okay. Um, Welcome to Storytime with Srta Pikula. It's Monday. Happy Monday to all of you, and I hope that all of you had a really great weekend and good Easter, and had a great time with all those egg hunts. And we're going to continue Prince Caspian today. But first, I wanted to give a shout out today. I don't know if I gave a shout out on Thursday. So I'm going to give a shout out to Miss Hadley, who, no matter where she is and what day it is, she loves learning so much. And her enthusiasm is absolutely contagious. And she's very encouraging to me. And she is absolutely awesome. So shout out to Hadley, to Miss Hadley. And we're going to do a little recap on what happened last time in Prince Caspian. So last time we were together, they all decided, after having their little sword fight and shooting match, that they needed to meet up with Caspian at once. So they were like, well, how are we going to get there? And they all decided to go by boat because that would be faster. So they all got in the boat. Trumpkin was to steer and everyone else was to row. And Lucy asked if she could row, but they all said, no, it's too little. You're too little. It'll be too hard for you. And rowing was draining work, and it was super hot in the sun. And all five of them, the four children and the dwarf, got totally exhausted. So after they'd been going for a pretty long time, they decided to stop and camp. And it was nighttime, and Lucy could not go to sleep. She could absolutely not go to sleep, and she was sitting there. She's like, "What should I do? What's happening?" And she could see the moonlight, and she got up and she started walking around. And she was walking through the forest, and she realized with the trees, she was remembering how the trees would move and how they would talk to her and like what forms they would take. The form of a young woman, the form of a man with a wrinkly face, all these different forms. And so she, as she was wandering through the trees, she said, "Oh, trees, 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 wake up, wake up!" And there was a sudden moment where it seemed like they were gonna all wake up, but then it didn't happen, as if she'd spoken too soon or too late or not quite said the right thing. So the trees are there. The spirits of the trees are there, but they can't quite wake up yet. And eventually, she began to feel very tired, and went back to sleep. And we're gonna continue from there. Ready? Okay. Quite suddenly, Lucy began to feel tired. She went back to the camp, snuggled between Susan and Peter, and was asleep in a few minutes. It was a cold and cheerless waking for them all the next morning, with a gray twilight in the woods, for the sun had not yet risen, and everything was damp and dirty. "Apples, hi ho," said Trumpkin with a rueful grin. "I must say, you ancient kings and queens don't overfeed your courtiers." They stood up and shook themselves and looked about. The trees were thick, and they could see no more than a few yards in any direction. "I suppose your majesties know the way all right," said the dwarf. "I don't," said Susan. "I've never seen these woods in my life before. In fact, I thought all along that we ought to have gone by the river." "Then I think you might have said so at the time," answered Peter, with pardonable sharpness. Oh, don't take any notice of her, said Edmund. She always is a wet blanket. You've got the pocket compass of yours, Peter, haven't you? Well, then, we're as right as rain. We've only got to keep going to northwest, across that little river. What do you call it? The Rush. I know, said Peter. The one that joins the big river at the fords of Baruna, or Baruna's Bridge, as the DLF calls it. DLF stands for Dear Little Friend. That's right. Cross it and strike uphill, and we'll be at the stone table, Aslan's how, I mean, by 8 or 9 o'clock. I hope King Caspian will give us a good breakfast. I hope you're right, said Susan. I can't remember all that at all. That's the worst of girls, said Edmund to Peter and the dwarf. They never carry a map in their heads. That's because our heads have something inside them, said Lucy. At first, things seemed to be going pretty well. They even thought they had struck an old path, but if you know anything about the woods, you will know that one is always finding imaginary paths. They disappear after about 5 minutes, and then you think you have found another, and hope it is not another, but more of the same one, and is also disappears. And after that, you've been well lured out of your right direction and realize that none of them were paths at all. The boys and the dwarf, however, were used to the woods and were not taken in for more than a few seconds. They had plodded on for about half an hour, three of them very stiff from yesterday's rowing in the water, when Trumpkin suddenly whispered, "Stop!" They all stopped. "There's something following us," he said in a low voice, "or rather, something keeping up with us. Over there on the left." They all stood still, listening and staring till their ears and eyes ached. "You and I better each have an arrow on the string," Susan said to Trumpkin. The dwarf nodded, and when both bows were ready for action, the party went on again. They went a few dozen yards through fairly open woodland, keeping a sharp lookout. They then came to a place where the undergrowth thickened and they had to pass nearer to it. Just as they were passing the place, there came a sudden something that snarled and flashed, rising out from the breaking twigs like a thunderbolt. Lucy was knocked down and winded, hearing the twang of a bowstring as she fell. When she was able to take notice of things again, she saw a great grim looking gray bear lying dead with Trumpkin's arrow in its side. "The DLF beat you in that shooting match, Sue," said Peter, with a slightly forced smile. Even he had been shaken by this adventure. I I left it too late," said Susan in an embarrassed voice. "I was so afraid it might be, you know, one of our kind of bears, a talking bear." She hated killing things. "That's the trouble of it," said Trumpkin. "When most of the beasts have gone enemy and gone dumb, but there are still some of the other kind left. You never know, and you dare not wait to see." "Poor old Bruin," said Susan. "You don't think he was?" "Not he," said the dwarf. "I saw the face and I heard the snarl. He only wanted little girl for his breakfast. And talking of breakfast, I didn't want to discourage your majesties when you said you hoped King Caspian would give you a good one. But meat's precious scarce in the camp, and there's good eating on a bear. It would be a shame to leave the carcass without taking a bit, and it won't delay us more than half an hour. I dare say you two youngsters, kings, I should say, how know how to skin a bear?" "Let's go and sit down a fair way off," said Susan to Lucy. "I know what a horrid messy business that will be." Lucy shuddered and nodded. When they had sat down, she said, "Such a horrible idea has come into my head, Sue." "What's that?" "Wouldn't it be dreadful if someday in our own world at home men started going wild inside, like the animals here, and still looked like men, so that you never know which were which?" "We've got enough to bother about here now in Narnia," said the practical Susan, "without imagining things like that." When they rejoined the boys and the dwarf, as much as they thought they could carry the best of the best meat they had cut off. No, as much as they thought they could carry of the best meat had cut off. Raw meat is not a nice thing to fill one's pockets with, but they folded it up in fresh leaves and made the best of it. They were all experienced enough to know that they would feel quite differently about these squashy and unpleasant parcels when they were walking long enough to be really hungry. Oh, and they trudged again, stopping to wash three pairs of hands that needed it in the first stream they passed, until the sun rose and the birds began to sing, and more flies than they wanted were buzzing in the brackens. The stiffness from yesterday's rowing began to wear off. Everybody's spirits rose. The sun grew warmer, and they took their helmets off and carried them. "I suppose we are going right?" said Edmund about an hour later. "I don't see how we can go wrong as long as we don't bear too much to the left," said Peter. "If we bear too much to the right, the worst that can happen is wasting a little time by striking the great river too soon and not cutting off the corner." And again they trudged on with no sound except the thud of their feet and the jingle of their chain shirts. "Where's this Bally Rush got to?" said Edmund with a good deal later. "I certainly thought we'd have struck it by now," said Peter, "but there's nothing to do but to keep on going." They both knew that the dwarf was looking anxiously at them, but he said nothing. And still they trudged on, and their mail shirts began to feel very hot and heavy. "What on earth?" said Peter suddenly. They had come, without seeing it, almost to edge, the edge of a small precipice from which they looked down into a gorge with a river at the bottom. A gorge is like a really steep valley. On the far side, the cliffs rose much higher. None of the party except Edmund, and perhaps Trumpkin, was a rock climber. "I'm sorry," said Peter. "It's my fault for coming this way. We're lost. I've never seen this place in my life before." The dwarf gave a low whistle between his teeth. "Oh, do let's go back and go the other way," said Susan. "I knew all along we'd get lost in these woods." "Susan," said Lucy reproachfully, "don't nag at Peter like that. It's so rotten, and he's doing all he can." "And don't you snap at Sue like that either," said Edmund. "I think she's quite right." "Tubs and tortoise shells!" exclaimed Trumpkin. "If we've got lost coming, what chance have we of finding our way back? And if we're to go back to the island and begin all over, even supposing we could, we might as well give the whole thing up. Miraz will have finished with Caspian before we get there at that rate." "Do you think we had to go on?" said Lucy. "I'm not sure the High King is lost," said Trumpkin. "What's to hinder this river from being the Rush?" "Because the Rush is not a gorge," said Peter, keeping his temper with some difficulty. "Your Majesty says is," replied the dwarf. "But oughtn't you to say was? You knew this country hundreds, it may be thousands of years ago. It probably has changed. A landslide might have pulled off half the side of that hill, leaving bare rock, and there are your precipices beyond the gorge. Then the Rush might go on deepening its course year after year till you get the little precipices on this side. Or there might have been an earthquake, or anything." "I never thought of that," said Peter. "And anyway," continued Trumpkin, "even if this is not the Rush, it's flowing roughly north, and so it must fall into the great river anyway. I think I passed something that might have been it on my way down. If we go downstream to our right, we'll hit to the great river. Perhaps not so high as we hoped, but at least we'll be no worse off than if you come my way." "Trumpkin, you're a brick," said Peter. "Come on, then, down this side of the gorge." "Look! Look! Look!" cried Lucy. "Where? What?" said everyone. "The lion!" said Lucy. "Aslan himself! Didn't you see?" Her face had changed completely, and her eyes shone. And that's where we're going to stop for today. That's so exciting. Okay, we're going to stop there for today. And I hope that you enjoyed story time. And I hope that you have a good rest of your Monday. And tune in next time and see you later.